Mamma mia, chaps. Is I, Clempuncher139. Little fun fact about me, I'm half Italian. So what better way to celebrate my heritage than with a video on the greatest Italian representation the media has ever given us. Cold.
Spaghetti.
Getting warmer. That's the one. Peppino Spaghetti is the most pure-blooded Italian ever put to the not-so-silver screen, and is also one of the most powerful characters in fiction. The man is able to run so fast that his face is considered a lethal weapon, and probably also a war crime in several countries. With a menace as powerful as that on the loose, it only feels right to nerf him a little bit. Can you beat Pizza Tower without running? The rules are pretty simple. Pizza Tower has a dedicated run button, and for the entirety of this challenge, that button must never be used to make Peppino go supersonic style. Other means of running, such as using dash pads, are allowed, as long as I don't press that little trigger on the side of my controller to make him go fast. While the game can technically be completed while skipping some levels here and there, I'm gonna make it my mission to beat every single level before going to fight Pizza Face. So, with the rules out of the way, it's pizza time! Also, I streamed this whole challenge right here on YouTube, so if you're interested in seeing more challenge runs and games, consider tuning in. The challenge, and naturally our first roadblock, comes at the tutorial. The start is nothing special, it plays out like the tutorial would for a first-time player with crawling and body slamming. However, our first roadblock of the challenge shows up just after collecting our first toppin'. A wall. Normally, walls are no issue, as running allows you to literally just run up walls. But since running isn't allowed, we need to find a different way up. Thankfully, there's a solution, but my hand is not going to like it. See, when you dash grab into a wall, you're given a small grace period where you're intended to start holding the run button so that Peppino will actually start running up the wall. But since we can't hold the run button, we need to make use of this grace period to its fullest extent. By spamming the dash button, we're able to slowly but surely climb up the wall. And thankfully, this can be used on every single wall in the game. So one of our biggest obstacles has been conquered for the foreseeable future. At the cost of my thumb spamming the button, only increasing my likelihood of obtaining carpal tunnel syndrome at a young age, but it's a worthy sacrifice to be made. The next room features blocks covering up low-hanging walls, which we're expected to run and slide under, but thankfully we have a solution to that as well. By dashing and immediately holding duck, Peppino will enter this really weird slide, which he can stay in literally indefinitely until he hits a wall. This will be our fastest consistent movement option for the rest of the game, assuming we don't have to jump, of course. Because the one consequence of entering this state is that it's very slow to exit. You either have to halt your movement entirely to stand up, or hit a wall or fall into a pit. None of which are all too pleasant an experience. But on the plus side, it allows us to break low-hanging blocks like this without needing to run. And its use doubles in the next room, where we reach the biggest roadblock that will continue to persist for the rest of the challenge. Metal blocks. Metal blocks can only be destroyed with a high-powered body slam, or with a mock run. And it just so happens that a good number of blocks are stuck in places where the only way to destroy them is with mock runs. But, like I said, there is a solution to this. And it's a whole hell of a lot more complicated than it has any right to be. What you need to do is start with the little slide, which from here on out I'm going to call a mock slide, because the special trick with this move is that it puts you right at the necessary speed to begin mock running, should you exit the slide and begin holding the run button. However, there's another move it allows you to immediately enter, and that's the super jump. If you press the buttons right, you can mock slide, then hold the run button and up at the same time to begin charging a super jump without ever entering the run state. Now, is this a violation of the rules since I did press the run button? Nope, because I specifically said that the rule was to never press the run button to make Peppino start running like a maniac. I never said we couldn't use it for other things, and thankfully, this applies as other things. Okay, so we've established that we're able to charge up a super jump, so what? Going up is not going to break the block to the right. As it turns out though, it actually is. Because pressing a direction and the dash button while performing a super jump allows us to do a shoulder bash. And this shoulder bash has the same power as a mock run without us needing to press the run button. So if we position our bash just right so that it'll hit the block before we touch the ground, we can bash straight into the block and destroy it. So we now have a way to get through every single obstacle blocking our path. Assuming we have the space to do it. because our tutorial shenanigans are not yet complete, as we have a bunch of other metal blocks in our path, starting with this one next to a small ledge. This ledge is just barely not long enough to charge up our mock slide into a super jump, so we're gonna have to find a different way to break it. We need to charge a slide on the lower level here, then super jump while hugging the right wall. Then we need to time our bash just right so that we're as high as possible, but obviously don't hit the ceiling. If all those factors work out just right, you can just barely break the block without running. And then there's yet another block behind it, this one in a very small crevice, meaning we have to get our shoulder bash timing perfect in order to hit it. Once again, just charge up a super jump on the lower level and hug the wall. Launch up and bash to the side as soon as you're perfectly center of the hole. The bash does make Peppino gain a tiny bit of height, so he'll be less likely to touch the ground when you unleash it. Then there's just 2 more blocks which use the same tactics before we get to what's supposed to be the turning tutorial. This area is meant to be a basic tutorial where you just run back and forth breaking the blocks, but we can't do that, so we must perform the tightest shoulder bashes in the game instead. Charge up super jumps on the level above the blocks, then move Peppino to the lower levels. Time your bash just right to destroy the blocks so we can move on to the super jump tutorial, which we've already gone over how to cheese our way into performing, so there's no need to cover. After that, there's just 1 more metal block in our path, which we destroy with ease, and the rest of the tutorial goes by without any problems. Congratulations! You just finished the tutorial level. We haven't even started the main game yet, and we're already running into a bunch of roadblocks. But we've also figured out ways to get past them already, meaning anything similar in future levels should be no problem. So, let's get through our first pizza time and head into our first real level of the game, John Gutter. John Gutter is a great level to show how we're going to be handling the game going forward, with every single one of our noteworthy roadblocks stopping us at some point or another. The very first room has a metal block that we need to destroy, so we're off to a good start. We also see the return of climbing walls, which, as a reminder, my thumb absolutely hates, but for the sake of this challenge, don't really mean anything. We then have our first, and as far as I can tell, only instance in this entire game of a pair of metal blocks obstructing our path. But that honestly just makes the challenge easier since it means we have a bigger target to hit. The rest of the level is no real issue, I just really hate these fort guys because they always stop any semblance of momentum I end up achieving, so I went out of my way to kill all of them. So we're able to make it to the Pillar John, and it's our first pizza time. I neglected mentioning it until now since it's the first real instance of it in the game. For those of you who haven't played Pizza Tower, firstly, what the hell are you doing watching this video? Go play the game yourself, it's only $20. And second, how this game works is you basically play through each level twice. In the first half, you run through the level taking as much time as you want. But after destroying Pillar John, it's pizza time, and you have to run through the entire level again backwards with a time limit. And seeing as we can't run in this challenge, that time limit is not going to be all too friendly to us. Just as an example, this first room in John Gutter is normally a complete smackdown with how fast you run. But since I have to take it slow, it ends up taking nearly a full minute for me to reach the pizza box at the end to enter the real roadblock of this level. This metal block in a super narrow passage. We don't have nearly enough room to super jump shoulder bash. Or so I thought. Honestly, you just have to get lucky with your bash timing and hope it'll destroy the block quickly. This will be a problem for future levels too, so just because I was able to get it quickly here, don't think I will for all levels in the future. The rest of this pizza time isn't too bad, since it consists of a new area that already isn't meant for running, and the rest of the level is already opened up, so there aren't many metal blocks for us to destroy, allowing us to reach the end of John Gutter without too many issues. Which then brings us to Pizzascape, which was a pretty uneventful level for the most part. There was a metal block towards the start blocking my path, but I had more than enough room to ready a super jump shoulder bash in this area. This next metal block is in a much worse position since it's under a ledge, but I was still able to get it first try. Part of the reason for the ease was the night power-up, which doesn't change in the slightest without being able to run, so any section with it was completely free. This wall was pretty annoying after collecting a key, but again, it's just spamming the grab button, which is only a problem for my hands. We're able to make it all the way to John no problem, and then it's pizza time again. The timing is a little bit stricter than on John Gutter, but there were absolutely no obstacles blocking my path, so I was able to make it with over a minute to spare. Next up is Ancient Cheese, which was a lot harder than I was expecting. Right in the first room, we have a metal block on a platform that's way too small for us to charge a super jump on. So what we have to do is start our mock slide on these cheese blocks below, prep the super jump, then jump and bash at exactly the right time to break the block. Then after grabbing the key is yet another metal block, this one a whole lot easier to destroy. And in the very next room, we have an obstacle I hadn't even thought of before this challenge because it simply didn't come up in the tutorial. Wall jumps. So what we have to do is really strange. We have to spam the button to climb up the wall, then slam Peppino's head into the cheese blocks. As you do so, quickly grab to the other direction to just barely make it to the other wall, landing on the cheese blocks. This gives you just barely enough time to jump and then start grabbing the wall again. Rinse and repeat until you reach the pizza box at the top. Oh, but we're not done with roadblocks yet, as in this room with the long cheese bridge, we have to deal with these fencers, I think? Regardless, they're even more annoying than the fork guys, and I ended up having 3 technical difficulties in this room because of them, so I had to take it slow on the bridge to actually make it across. And then finally we reach pizza time, and this is one of the tightest pizza times we've had in the whole challenge, because the start was a staircase of cheese blocks guarded by a metal block under the small ceiling. This is one of the tightest shoulder bashes we've had to get in the whole run, because you have to set up the super jump on the lower level, then time your shoulder bash perfectly to fit into the hole and hit the block. I was barely able to do it and lost nearly a full minute of pizza time, so I had to seriously rush through the rest of the level. Starting with what I thought needed to be a wall run into a wall jump onto these cheese blocks, but was actually a complete waste of my time and could have just been accomplished with a basic super jump, so more time was lost. There was a lot of wall climbing in this pizza time, so my thumb did not like it by the end. Thankfully, the rest of the level didn't have any roadblocks aside from those walls, so I was able to make it to the end, but with only 5 seconds left of pizza time when I exited. Remember, this is only the 3rd level and we're already cutting it that close. What's that got to say about the rest of the game to come? Well, as it turns out, a completely impossible level as our next one. Bloodsauce Dungeon. Most of the level isn't all that bad, just a little slow and tedious because we can't just run through everything and there's a bunch of enemies blocking our way. But once we get to the blackout areas, we start encountering actual problems. Like this metal block on a very small corridor with not a lot of run-up space to get mock slide going. There is just enough for us to do it, and I was able to thankfully get it first try, but we're not even close to done. As on the very next level below, we have another with even less space to work with. This took a lot of attempts, but eventually I figured it out. You need to place Peppino right on the edge of this ledge to do a mock slide and perfectly time your super jump charge so that you don't slam into the block. Then do the regular old shoulder bash move to break the block and continue on, but not for long. After this really annoying section, we come to the exact same problem on an even smaller scale. We just don't have enough room anywhere in this area to charge up a mock slide or super jump to break this block. I tried a lot of options, but there's just no way to do it with our current setup. So Bloodsauce Dungeon is simply impossible. But we'll put a pin in it later just in case we need some more money. For now, we'll move on to the Pepperman boss fight, which has absolutely no impact on this challenge because bosses don't require running. So we can move on up the tower to floor 2, starting with the always lovely Oregano Desert. Honestly, aside from a few metal blocks, this level didn't have anything to talk about. There weren't any in super difficult positions, let alone during pizza time, making this one of the easiest levels we've had, with nearly a minute and a half left on the pizza timer. Only the rest of the levels would be so nice. Like our next level, Wasteyard, which was similarly very easy aside from a few metal blocks. But unlike Oregano Desert, these ones were in much harder locations. Like this one inside a narrow tunnel, where we need to time the bash just right so that we don't immediately hit the ceiling. And if one wasn't bad enough, how about a second just a little bit later? Those were a little annoying, but nothing compared to this block right in front of Pillar John. It's another perfect timing situation. Charge up a mock slide and super jump on this lower area, then just hope you can get the perfectly timed shoulder bash into the block. It took me a stupid number of attempts, but thankfully we weren't in pizza time yet, so we don't have to worry about how long it takes as long as it gets done. And when it finally does, we have no time to celebrate as we're immediately thrown into pizza time. Now this pizza time is special, because John decides that this is the level where he's gonna get his revenge, and he chases us down as a ghost. And if he ever catches us, we have to restart the room we're currently in. That's not good when you can't run. Thankfully, the closer John gets to us, the slower he moves, so even if he's right on top of you, you have a chance to escape and continue the room. Thankfully, there are absolutely no metal blocks during this pizza time segment, so all we have to worry about is Ghost John. And while there are a few close calls, and I even got caught a few times, a good amount of the escape also features surfing corpses, so I'm able to get a lot of my speed without ever running. And by the end, I still had over a minute left on my pizza timer, so this level was no sweat. Next up is Fun Farm, featuring Mort the Chicken. And there were absolutely no issues here aside from a single metal block towards the start of the level. Part of that was no doubt because of Mort taking up nearly half the level, so there was very little of it that would even need to be able to run in, leading to by far the easiest level in the whole game. The same cannot be said of FastFood Saloon. The gimmick of this level is races. You need to race horses in order to obtain toppins, and if you fail the race, even once, you lose out on that toppin and need to start the entire level over. There are also these sauce gates which have super strict timers, and since we can't run, it's incredibly difficult to get through them on time. This first one alone took me well over 2 minutes to get, and I think it just took pity on me anyway, leaving it open just long enough for me to slide through. The second gate is a lot more generous since you basically just need to slide right to it though. Thankfully, those are the only ones we need to get normally, as the rest of this level is based around the weenie. The weenie essentially gives us Mach speed without needing to run, so we'll be taking full advantage of them to make the sauce cycles. We then had our next race against a horse, and I just completely flubbed it, losing me out on a toppin. I didn't worry about it too much though, because I had more than enough money from the rest of this floor, so I'd only go back and get it if we absolutely needed to. The next two sauce gates were thankfully done with the weenie, so they weren't a problem. This was also the case for the next horse race, so that toppin was also no issue. And then just like that, it's pizza time, which thankfully didn't involve any races to speak of aside from against the clock, though it was pretty much completely free aside from a few annoying enemies blocking my path. And that ends floor 2, after we beat up the vigilante of course, in a super easy boss fight with no impact on this challenge. Which means that we're on to floor 3, starting with Crust Cove. And this level introduces one of our worst nightmares: water tiles. Water tiles are special in that if you were playing this game like a normal person, they don't appear to do anything at all, because you'd be Mach running across them. However, since we're not allowed to run, we're forced to walk across at normal speed, which just so happens to make Peppino's ass the perfect food source for these pineapple piranhas. In other words, if these tiles ever block our path, we're just gonna have to take the bite like a man and move on. Which is very unfortunate for the first toppin in this level, who is locked behind a long pit of water that we have absolutely no way of making it through, meaning we have no way of getting it, and again, have to skip it for now. We'll come back later if we have to though. The rest of this level is mostly dedicated to the barrel power-up, which requires you to use the run button to make Peppino roll in it. Again, this isn't technically a violation of the rules, so we're allowed to do it. The barrel makes most sections of this level a complete breeze, since I just held the button and let it do the work for me. This one section with the cannonballs looks like it would be hard on paper, but they fall way too slow to ever be a threat. And while the water tiles do slow us down a bit, they aren't blocking anything important, so we're able to make it to John without issue, and it's pizza time again. And a good majority of this pizza time is dedicated to the barrel, meaning I can just let the game play itself for a bit, and we're eventually able to make it to the exit without worries. We did miss out on that first toppin, but we've got more than enough money and levels for right now, so that'll be a problem for the future. Next up is Gnome Forest, which I'll just say right now is straight up impossible. And unlike Bloodsauce Dungeon, where there might be a chance to beat it in the future, there's no way we're beating this one because of two little guys who decided to take over, Gustavo and Brick. These two take over the level and have a completely different moveset from Peppino, which unfortunately includes no way to break metal blocks in front of them. That isn't an issue for the first good portion of the level, but once we reach this roadblock with a covered path, there's just no way. The only way to get through this block is by Mach running, which we don't have another way to replicate with these two like we do with Peppino. So this single block has made another level impossible for us to beat, which is not going to be a good sign going forward. But for now, we must move on to a much more possible level: golf. While the level plays out even slower than an actual game of 18-hole golf, there are practically no roadblocks to speak of. The only metal block in our way is directly in front of a dash pad, which, as I've said, are allowed to be used as long as we don't press the run button while using them. We're able to complete all the courses, with a Primo Berg no less, and get all the top-ends. And this level has the longest pizza time in the whole game because of how long they expect golfing to take, so the escape sequence is absolutely no issue either. Especially since half of it is dedicated to rolling as Ball Peppino, which again practically plays the game itself for us, leading to one of the easiest levels we've had in a while. Next up is Deep Dish 9, which introduces the rocket power-up, one of the absolute best for this challenge, since it takes away our need to use the run button and just does it for us. And because of how much we end up using this power throughout the level, there are practically no blocks able to stand in our way. We're able to make it all the way to pizza time without any issues, aside from me not remembering the level and forgetting where to go a few times, of course. But aside from that, this level was an absolute breeze, another of the easiest levels in this challenge. And when you follow it up with a battle against the noise, which obviously has no impact on this challenge, we're already done with floor 3. Sucks that we had an impossible level mixed in there, but I'm sure it won't bite us in the ass at all. Time for floor 4, and the start of the hardest levels both in the base game and for this challenge. Starting with one of my favorite levels, Pig City. The gimmick of this level is taking taxis to different areas to collect the top-ends, and unfortunately, one of these areas is straight up impossible, because of these cheeky bastards blocking the way. These cop pigs will handcuff Peppino to them, restricting his movement to a tiny area around them. Normally this is good because it allows you to build up mock speed in the small area, then turn around and quickly murder them. But since we're not allowed to run, we're physically incapable of doing that. You might think we can build up a mock slide and just do a shoulder bash, but no. These guys completely prevent us from entering the super jump state, meaning there's no way to remove them or even come close to escaping. So if we ever get caught by one of these guys, it's an instant reset. And one of them just so happens to be perfectly blocking a metal block with a top-end behind it, meaning it's impossible to access, or at least damn near, because I don't have nearly enough patience to keep trying with these guys. So that's one topping completely off the table, but since it's not a required area, we can just skip it and keep going through the rest of the level. Area 2 is more than doable, albeit with a few things blocking our path. A decent number of metal blocks, which can be beaten with our reliable shoulder bash, and being careful to avoid the cops in all these areas. Thankfully, this one directly on our path will completely ignore our existence as long as we hold onto this balloon, so he gives us no issues. The rest of the area is totally free, so we're able to get that top in easily. Area 3 has a few more cops for us to avoid, including one blocking a metal block, but there's a lot more space to work with, so we're able to avoid him and break the block after a few tries. After that, Peppino is thrown in the slammer, and we're off to Gustavo and Brick again, which should be terrifying after the problems we had in Gnome Forests. But surprisingly, there are absolutely no metal blocks in their section of the level, making it one of the easiest parts of this challenge in a long while. There are even cops in their section, but since all they do is temporarily lock up Brick, they're super easy to deal with. We're able to make it all the way to John without issue, then back to Peppino during pizza time, who has no problem during his escape sequence. So while we again had to miss out on a single top-end, we were able to complete the level, despite my fear with Gustavo and Brick. Next up is the ice level with a name I still don't know how to say, and I'm not going to bother looking up because I don't really care about this level, because it was thankfully incredibly easy. Aside from the regular difficulty of the level, there wasn't much in our way for this one, and I was able to beat it relatively painlessly. There's a few metal blocks in the way, as usual, but none of them were in particularly difficult spots. And by the time we got the firepower up, the level turned into a complete joke. Easy 5 top-ends. So we headed right on down to Peppibot Factory, which brought us right back into the difficult tier. Almost immediately, we need to make this stupidly long jump from this wall, but since it's just out of reach, and I don't want to keep putting my thumb on life support, I tried something else. Charge up a super jump on this ledge, then go all the way down here, just out of reach of this ledge, and let her rip all the way to the top. Then shoulder bash and you'll make it up. But our problems are just getting started. As in this room, we need to make an incredibly tight shoulder bash into this metal block, Thankfully we have a dash pad here, so I don't need to keep pulling off the difficult slide into super jump inputs, but that doesn't change how tight this squeeze is. One of the hardest we've had to do for the challenge. And as a reminder, this is at the very beginning of the level. Thankfully, when we reach the actual factory part of the Peppibot Factory, the level becomes quite a bit easier, since there are dash pads galore, which allows us to break through blocks with ease. And in the few areas that there aren't, the conveyor belts serve to slow down our slide enough to charge up super jumps on even the smallest of runways. We can even use this dash pad here with a well-timed jump to save our Mach speed for just long enough to reach the lift hand and break this block up here, which is nice. By the time we reach Pillar John, there's no more metal blocks for us to worry about, so it's just a matter of reaching the end gate before pizza time runs out, which is super easy when half of pizza time is spent in box form. Few difficult parts toward the beginning, but otherwise a pretty easy level. Which leads us into the most difficult possible level in the game. The very appropriately named, Oh Shit. Most of the level isn't really all that bad. There's a few metal blocks in our path, but ultimately nothing too special that we haven't seen before. That is until we reach Pillar John, and run into a familiar problem from Crust Cove, water tiles. These ones, however, are actually a problem that we need to deal with, because their inclusion means that we can't attack John. Water tiles prevent you from using the dash grab, since Peppino is too busy getting bitten to do anything else. And since there's no solid ground leading up to John, we're stuck perpetually bouncing in front of him on the water tiles. Thankfully though, there is a solution. This tiny green piece of land is actually solid, and you can stand on it. So just position Peppino right to land on it, then jump and attack John to start the single hardest pizza time escape of the whole challenge. And it's once again all because of water tiles. This long section of water is normally no issue for the average player to get through, because you're getting shot out of a pipe already at Mach speed. But since we aren't allowed to maintain our Mach speed by holding the run button, the second we touch the water, we're getting shot up into an inescapable prison cell. We are literally Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill with this one. So it looks like we're stuck. This passage is way too long for us to jump over, and the only way to not get bitten by the piranhas is by running. So, is this the end? Not necessarily. See, there is one sneaky way we can actually run across this pond. But by God, is it stupid, tedious, and incredibly difficult to pull off. So I mentioned the fact that the pipe spits us out at Mach speed for a reason. It's because we're actually able to maintain this speed without holding the run button, and it all has to do with turning. When you turn Peppino around while he's at Mach speed, there's a very small window of time where he's still considered to be at Mach speed, regardless of whether or not you're holding down the run button. Theoretically, this means you can make Peppino turn back and forth indefinitely without ever pressing another button. But that isn't what we're going to do. We're going to use this tiny window to extend our Mach run by jumping. In that tiny window where Peppino is still considered running, on top of being able to turn around, you can also jump. And this jump just so happens to maintain your Mach speed, extending that window to allow you to turn around and keep maintaining the speed. Which essentially means that we can chain together turns and jumps with pinpoint accuracy to slowly move Peppino forward over the water. It is incredibly difficult to maintain and even took me failing the level in order to actually get it, but it is possible to get across this sheet of water. But don't get complacent, because we've still got to escape the rest of the level, and we're already down a full minute. Thankfully, the rest of pizza time isn't hard, but it is certainly slow, especially with this section with a perfectly placed banana peel blocking our jump. But we're eventually able to get it. And despite how slow we're moving, we are able to make it back to the gate with only 30 seconds to spare. Easily the toughest level that we faced in the whole challenge. But thankfully, that's the end of floor 4, aside from a battle against Bruno, which is just another boss fight, so of course it's perfectly easy to beat and has no effect on this challenge. Oh yeah, there is the matter of the escape sequence at the end of the fight. Normally this sequence doesn't matter, you're running so fast that you never see the abomination, let alone ever get attacked by him. However, since we can't run at all, we run into more than a few problems. Bruno is able to catch up with us since his speed increases as the chase goes on, which means he's able to attack poor Peppino. and this douche nozzle decides to take 2 health per attack just because he can. Thankfully, I had 5 health going into this phase, so despite getting hit twice, I was just barely able to make it to the exit and finish the fight, earning myself my one and only D rank in the process, but I'll take it as long as I don't have to go through that again. And with that, we've reached the final area of the game, Floor 5. And we once again bear witness to the hardest levels in the game, starting with just straight up the actual hardest from the base game, Pizzascare. And that difficulty all comes down to this angry bastard. He follows us around the whole level, just making our lives a living hell. He's hard enough to avoid in a normal playthrough, but when you can't run, why even bother? Right away, we have a metal roadblock that just so happens to be a few feet away from one of his traps, meaning we have to perfectly space out our mock dash and super jump to be away from him so that we don't get hit. Then in the very next room, we have this section with another block right next to another of his traps. In this one, we don't even have enough run-up room to charge our mock dash, so we have to do it in between these 2 traps, then time the shoulder bash with our target off screen. It's a pain, but we are able to get it. And then we have another one with 2 little run-up in the very next room. Thankfully, we have plenty of other platforms to work with, so it's not too hard to get. The rest of the level isn't all too bad until we reach pizza time, and from there it's a perfectly normal difficulty escape sequence, with nothing noteworthy standing in our path, thank God. So with that, we move on to everyone's favorite Five Nights at Freddy's clone, Don't Make a Sound. The early part of the level is pretty easy, with just a few enemies blocking our path that we need to kill quickly. But when we make it to the kitchen is when we start running into problems. This block here is another one without appropriate run-up space, so we need to get a little creative to break it. Unfortunately, immediately after breaking it, we need to haul ass to get to the end of the room because there are some impossible to destroy alarms immediately after it. Unfortunately, I wasn't fast enough in breaking this block and ended up getting caught, forcing me to restart the room. Thankfully, the block didn't reset, so on the next go around, I just used my super taunt to destroy him so I wouldn't have to be under a strict time limit. Except right after doing it, I activated another guy, so my efforts were worthless, as I was put right back under that same time constraint. Thankfully, it didn't matter because I'm a gamer, and we moved into the next room. That room had a few close calls thanks to the sludge, but was otherwise harmless. This wall climb was a bit annoying thanks to the electrical blocks, but since there's a small window where you're allowed to jump while grab climbing, I just used that to reach the top no problem. Unfortunately, I had a major fuck up in the next room. This metal block is meant to be broken with a high-powered body slam, and the way to do that is by climbing this wall. Except I totally screwed myself and ended up going into the secret area by climbing a bit too high. To my absolute relief, this secret is not a problem. You just need to run away from the puppet as he follows your movements. There were plenty of close calls and a lot of grab spamming because of the wall climbing, but it was otherwise just a small roadblock in this level, unlike the final chase where every single animatronic is chasing you down. When you can't do actual running, this shit is terrifying. So many close calls, and even a failed attempt thrown in there for good measure. But after that, we obtained the shotgun, making the rest of this level a complete breeze. Now, unfortunately, wielding the shotgun means that we're no longer able to climb up walls, since the gun takes away our ability to grab. But that's no issue for this pizza time, since the whole escape sequence is dedicated to going down. We are also a lot slower, since it means we can no longer do mock slides, but the timer is more than generous enough for us to make it to the end without issue. But the same cannot be said of our final level of the challenge, War. We are once again faced with a straight-up impossible level. And ironically, it's because of the thing meant to make the level easier. As I said, while Peppino has the shotgun, he's unable to dash. And since dashing was the primary reason we even had a moveset in this challenge, it means we practically can't do anything in this level. All we can do is grab the gun and waddle our way to the second screen where we're immediately stopped by a wall. Since we can't dash, we can't grab the wall or even charge up a super jump with a mock slide. There is absolutely nothing we can do to get past this ledge. And even if there somehow was, this level is way too long on way too strict a timer to keep doing slow and precise tricks like our shoulder bash technique. There's just no way for it to be done. Which sucks, because this is my favorite level in the game and now I just don't get to play it. and also because it means that our journey has come to an end. With all these impossible levels and missed top-ins, we aren't allowed access to the final level of the game. We need at least $210 to open the final door, and we only have $120. We could increase that to $130 by getting the top-in we missed in FastFood Saloon, but as far as I can tell, that's the only one we'd be able to get. With 3 impossible levels, there's just no way for us to get our funds up enough. And the worst part is that the final level of the game is completely possible. The final battle against Pizza Head and the others is completely free, as none of the phase requires running whatsoever. And the Crumbling Tower of Pizza is completely doable. I went into a completed save file just to see if it could be done, and I got it on my first try. There's only a single metal block in the whole level, and it's right in front of a dash pad, so the only difficulty is going fast enough throughout the whole level to outrun the timer. Which I was able to do, albeit cutting it closer than any other level in the game with only a single second to spare. But the simple fact of the matter is that I did it. And if any of those 3 levels were possible, we could say that you can beat Pizza Tower without running. But because of the designs of Bloodsauce Dungeon, Gnome Forest, and War, we cannot. It is not possible to beat Pizza Tower without running. But damn it if we didn't come close. Hope you enjoyed this challenge, chaps. Thanks for watching. This is your friendly reminder to support your locally owned businesses whenever you can, because one of these days they could be subjected to their own Pizza Tower and be forced to run like a maniac through increasingly convoluted levels in hope of taking down Big Pizza. Just a thought. With that in mind, do all the YouTube stuff, because it's pizza time, baby! Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later, chaps.